Okay, we're moving into our first conversation for this morning. As I stated earlier, if you're just joining us, we are having a conversation looking at the implication of corruption on the country, specifically the economic impact. And of course, to be able to have this conversation with us, we are joined by Senator Mark Lizarraga. He is the business senator, or the business representative in the Senate. Good morning.
Good morning, Marlene, and thank you so much for this opportunity once again. Good morning, Belize. And it's a lovely morning.
Yes, it is.
And as people are waking up, I understand so are the unions. I'm seeing some messages on Facebook that the unions are gearing up for they're waking up, gearing up for some action. And of course, they're continuing with this championing that the teachers, the BNTU, have been championing. And good morning and welcome to the NTUCB and the PUC.
PSU.
PSU.
Yes.
Yes.
So let me jump in there, because I think last week was just such a rapidly moving week, and I say it, and it still is an understatement. Things changed from the morning to the nighttime. There were a lot of questions. There were a lot of politically movement that was taking place, and non-movement and eventual movement, that we didn't really put into perspective just the core issue here. And the core issue really is the allegation of corruption that we're seeing play out publicly and the implications that come from that. Let me just ask you, in terms of your own analysis or your observations based on the activities that took place last week. Last Monday around this time, we were talking about the election of Honorable John Saldivar as the leader of the United Democratic Party. And by the end of the week, he was no longer a party leader. In fact, he was no longer a member of cabinet. That's how quickly the week moved. Yeah,
well, let me say, you're right, there was a flurry of activity.
Yeah.
On the issue of John Saldivar, perhaps this is the time to, I wasn't planning on starting here, but perhaps this is the place we're going to start. John Saldivar made a release, and I think he touched perhaps the most fundamental cause of a lot of what we're seeing happening in government. And he says, and let me quote, he says, "This whole episode has caused me to reflect on the real jeopardy that looms over the head of politicians who pursue their work with zeal and gusto. The demands of our constituencies are great and resources are very scarce. We politicians spend most of our waking hours soliciting money to fulfill the needs of our constituency. We knock on every door possible and we talk to every potential donor." So, there you have it. We elect people to office really to manage the affairs of the country, to manage ministries, to help improve our lives. But self-confessed, we're seeing here that politicians, for the most part, spend every moment of their waking hour trying to raise funds to take care of their constituency demands. And it is an area where we do not have legislation to regulate.
Soliciting funds.
Soliciting funds, campaign financing, how politicians receive money, from who they should receive it, how much they should receive, and how they should account for it. Now, the Chamber of Commerce issued a release on February the 11th.
Yes.
Calling again for certain things that are not new. We've been calling for these things for a long time. But in addition, it called for an investigation into this matter. Why is this important? Because it seems that, at least at the cursory look at it, and as confessed by some of Mr. Saldivar's colleagues, that while he claims that this was a political contribution, in fact, there was a quid pro quo, because he was lobbying his colleagues to try and get a diplomatic passport for this gentleman. So that's a very serious...
As stated by the Prime Minister himself.
Yes, exactly. His colleagues said as much. If that is the case, that's something completely different, because our laws are very specific, and as you say, we have a lot of laws and a lot of institutions that should be upholding those laws, including the Integrity Commission, including the Public Accounts Committee, a whole host of other institutions. But the theme has been, not only from the chamber, but the theme has also been from, oh, by the way, and the chamber as well called not only on the Prime Minister to do certain things, but also the Attorney General, who is now the Minister responsible for police.
Yes. So let me just try to get this back into focus. The press release that was issued last Tuesday, I believe, it was as a result of what was finally revealed within the court in Utah, something that we essentially knew was looming the entire time, that there would be evidence presented, as was stated in the pretrial hearing, as was evident by the declaration of evidence that would be submitted, that there was a government minister who received money from Lev Dermen. On Monday, it was finally revealed, more details on Tuesday. So the Chamber of Commerce then calls upon the Prime Minister and the Attorney General to start an investigation. You know, this was something that was, and using specifically the Mutual Legal Assistance Treaty, which allows for the government of Belize to access information through the United States government. This has actually come to fruition. This is what we are being told in terms of them getting the evidence itself. What we have not heard, and I can be corrected at any time, is whether or not the investigation will follow through, because the first press statement or public statement made by the Prime Minister was in fact saying that we'd seek the evidence to verify, because Honorable John Saldivar was still denying the allegations made against him.
Well, first of all, let me say kudos to the press. I think, and especially Channel 5, you guys have done a wonderful job in covering this story from the outset. That one of the big areas that are weak in our country is the implementation of existing legislation.
Yeah.
And the will to do so. We have seen this in many cases. It's yet to be seen if the people that are tasked with investigating will do so. But I want to move over and beyond that. I want us to look, yes, we can all agree that there's a horrible absence of the implementation of laws on the books, and we can touch those if you want.
No, but my question is, what is the purpose of the investigation? Is it simply to reveal to the public how these funds were moved, why these funds were moved? I mean, there's a serious allegation here, and we don't know the sequence, the $50,000 that should have been received in cash in Miami, whether it was moved into Belize, how it was moved into Belize.
Has any investigation proved fruitful in this country for any political person that has been appointed? We have seen...
But you were a part of the Senate Select Committee investigating the Auditor General's report.
And we're still waiting on that report. But besides the report, the Auditor General continues to make reports, damning reports, about irregularities, about illegalities, about breach of rules, about breach of procedures. We're not following the Finance and Audit Reform Act, and I can go on and on and on and on. To me, the exciting thing about this week really is that people are beginning to wake up. The union has said some very, very strong things, right? And it's in line with following up along what the chamber has been saying for a long time. The union is saying that that the behavior that we have seen is contrary to regulations, is contrary to law, so another law being broken. The union has said that they're seeing a lot of things, that we have excessive political interference in the running of our public service, and we've known this for a long time. And I'm happy that they're saying it now, because it's been going on for donkey's years. They're saying that there's unequal treatment to public officers. People get special treatment because of who they're related to or who appoints them to the office. They're saying that there's intimidation and non-payment of allowances, monies that are due to them. But because people are being intimidated in the public service, and you use the money, you hold it back, you know, give them what they're just due because they're not saying or doing the right things. Ensure that corruption by ministers and public officers is reduced and eradicated. So they're admitting now that we have corruption and that ministers are involved in corruption as well as public officers. They're saying as well that the procurement processes need to be enacted properly to reduce corruption. These are all the things that we have been championing and saying. I'm so happy to see that this is from the Public Service Union now. And we're seeing that we should have an end of political abuse and victimization by ministers and ensure that we follow the regulations. So we have the laws. What we don't have is the implementation of the laws. And perhaps I'm happy that this week will be a week of much discourse and a lot of expectations and demands. You'll be hearing from the unions what it is that they expect. Yeah. I suspect that the chamber again will be coming out with a statement, hopefully, not only in support, but making its demands as well. And this is the time to do it, isn't it? It's political season. This is the time when politicians will be making promises, and we have to try and hold them to those promises. In all of this, the Prime Minister appeared to come out and do some things, or said, promise some action. Yeah. Well, the PSU again put out another release on the 13th of February and called it, you know, it's merely a fly swatter, what the Prime Minister. So they certainly have not been satisfied with that, with those things.
That was at first with just the suspension.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
And that changed by the end of the week. As I said, everything that we can speak of, that they're changing scenarios that took place within the span of 4 or 5 days.
Right.
But what we did end off the week with was essentially what you just mentioned, which was the call from the Public Service Union about corruption. And
as well, the Belize network of NGOs.
Yes.
Put out a statement, and they as well demanded to know certain things, and they called again for campaign financing regulations and laws to be put into effect.
Now, you said it before, and I think that's a great starting point. There's what happened politically. There's the fallout that has taken place there, and that was the headlines of the entire week. But there's also the actions that took place and the implications. And I think that part of the frustration that people feel is that when you hear tens of thousands of dollars being moved around without a known purpose, even if they say it's campaign financing, we still don't have proof. It's a frustrating situation for a country that, let's be honest, almost half is impoverished. And you know, I think that the jokes that came about from, you know, I need my February tranche, or I need my February and March money at the same time, people were making light of something because it seems so ludicrous. Others don't have this type of access to just getting additional funds to supplement their lifestyle. And that brings us to the core issue, which is where the economic implications in this country for corruption, and corruption goes the full gamut, from sneaking in something across the border to receiving illicit money to assisting in any other illegal activities. There's a whole long spectrum that we can look at. But when you see this as the business representative in the Senate, where do you think the corruption that we know and may not be able to prove, but that we know exists in this country, is hurting us the most financially?
It is ironical that the politicians appear to be, or they claim to be, chasing all this money, all these donations, for helping the constituents, the very poor that really need it in a lot of instances. And they're giving them this fish, or they're giving them a piece of bread, throwing crumbs to them. When really these people are put into power to govern the affairs of our country. There's enough evidence and there's enough scientific research that the people that truly suffer the most from corruption are the poor people, are the poor, because they're denied a lot of the basic resources that they need. They're denied access to a lot of the services that a government should provide and that don't. Why is that important to us? Corruption, again, just to go back to the basics, is expensive. It doesn't promote competition. When people get special favors or have special access, whether it be to contracts or to jobs, positions, whatever, then there are favors there. There's almost like, you know, you do something for me, at some stage I'll have to do something for you. And you're not encouraging that competitive spirit that any economy needs to truly thrive. As well, when we have bloated expenditure on the part of the government, and the government needs resources to recover those expenditures, it translates directly to higher taxes, higher prices, higher price for gasoline, higher price for everything that affects all of us, and especially the poor people. So it's a double-edged sword, you know. It cuts you coming and going any way you take it. One, it kills competitiveness, and two, the whole atmosphere is described as being one of distracting. We cannot focus on the work that we have been sent to Belmopan to do, because our full time, all our waking hours, is spent trying to raise funds.
To help constituents.
To help constituents is the excuse.
Well, I mean, I would say we should call upon constituents to see how much help they've gotten so far.
I agree, and all of this is a part of campaign financing regulations that I'm sure will be included in any call for campaign finance regulation. It's a must. It's absolutely a must. And as a part of this reform as well, we have to look seriously at institutionalizing, I believe, the way we help people in this country, so that politicians don't spend every waking moment trying to take care of your light bill, or trying to take care of your school fees, or trying to take care of your baby baptism, or the funeral for the person, for the the expenses for the funeral and the caskets. I mean, that is not the job of elected politicians. It might keep you in office, as we've seen, right? But it corrupts that. The very premise of that is that I don't have the resources. Government resources are not allocated enough for that. So I have to do this search for anybody and everybody that will willingly make a contribution to me. Now, we've seen where that has led. We've seen where that has led in so many instances.
This statement and the portion that you have quoted specifically, some will just see as a cop-out. You know, it's an excuse to be used. But the truth in what is being said, and I think that's what you're highlighting here, is what area representatives or elected officials are saying their role is, and what they're actually supposed to be doing. Now, if you have a functioning human development system or social services system, if you have a functioning education system, if you have a functioning housing system, if you have functioning ministries that offer the basic needs to support those who need the support in the country, then no elected officials would need to be in a house checking on groceries or providing for those who actually need. And I'm saying that very specifically because we don't even know the people who receive this the profits of this hard-working day-to-day grind of soliciting actually go to people who need. We don't know that.
Exactly. And you know, the Prevention of Corruption Act, Chapter 105 of the laws of Belize, it's very clear. It says, it speaks to an advantage, and it defines advantage as including any money or donation or gift, or loan, or fee, or reward, valuable security, or property in the value of over $2,500. It says several things. It says, first of all, you must declare it to the Integrity Commission. It would be very interesting to see if all these hundreds of thousands of dollars that we keep hearing about being given to politicians either by money, or donations, or a gift, or property. How many politicians we have seen selling property in the Pine Ridge and selling property and having possession of large tracts of property?
Or using the social rate. Did you know there was a social rate for,
I never know
land?
that. I didn't know that there was even a policy as such. And then if the policy, we should all be entitled to it. The minister shouldn't get on TV and say, no worry, I'll give you a piece too for keep you quiet or for whatever, for appease you. That to me was, it's typical of the way they feel that they are entitled to dispose of public assets.
And I'm grateful.
And if you have a policy, it should be for everybody, not for those that are of the right color, of the right families,
or to appease a person,
or to appease somebody. Yes, exactly.
Yeah. No, and I think what you're saying is on point, because it is a culture, Senator. And it's a culture that goes beyond our politicians. We have to be honest about this. And I don't want to sit here and cast judgment on elected officials, because it is also about the electorate as well. It is about the business community as
the
well.
Electorate, everybody.
The public service, those who assist in the processes. It is an overall culture in the country.
People do not truly understand the term democracy, you know, because we don't live in a democracy, we live in a kleptocracy. That is what our country has become. That is what our country has become. Nobody follows the rules, the procedures, the laws, and those that are supposed to do it, those that were supposed to bring accountability, transparency, and reform, have not done it. Those that are in power that should be focused on this type of cleaning up of the system that has corrupted every institution almost in our government, are not focused on that. So we are right back where we were when we decided that the PUP government was corrupt and we wanted to get rid of them. We were right back where we were, or worse.
And that was the platform that
this administration came to power on.
And which is why the machete analogy keeps on coming up, because that was a part of what
the PSU has told you. It's not a machete, it's a fly swatter.
But let's not move on from this point so quickly. There's a practical part of the conversation that has to take place. The corruption exists. The inefficiencies and the handout system that has been long established in this country is now believed by many to be the only way to get into office if they want to make a change. So how do we move? The frustration from people in what they're hearing, it's palpable. But I don't know if the frustration that they feel, we all feel, not they, we all feel, is resonating with the type of actions that we individually will have to take. And I mean individually as a citizen, a voter, or as a collective body, the media, the business sector, whatever other organization or entity or role you uphold.
Well, let me say this. I'm happy to see several things that have happened. One, the opposition has woken up and has said, look, we are making commitments to certain things. We've heard that from politicians before. And they have at least spoken the right words. Now, how do we hold them to that?
If they, no,
that's right. It's no different than the machete. I said many things, right? That's but one. That was what started it. But what I'm happy about now is I'm seeing that the unions who have the numbers, who can mobilize numbers, are waking up and saying, look, you know, enough is enough. We need to do something. And I want to make an appeal here to the people, the citizens of this country, to come out and support the unions and support all those organizations that will be rallying for better in our system of governance. I want to ask all the citizens, students, young people of this country to support them, because they're the ones that are going to be paying for all of this corruption. And we are the ones that are paying for it now, of course. So it's important for everybody to get involved. This is you know, I was looking at Transparency International to try and see how...
Which we don't have an arm of in Belize.
Which we don't have an arm of in Belize. We're not even on the corruption index because apparently we don't want them, or we haven't invited them. But it speaks to little steps. And you and I have had this conversation many times before. All we can do is continue educating. Thanks to the press, a lot of wonderful information is coming out. People are beginning to wake up to these realities. And now, what do? That's what you're trying to say. How do we translate it into action?
Well, not only that, because again, I'm going back to the core point here, which is how do we help all of us understand that if we, I get that we are frustrated. And I believe I was telling Audrey Matura in last week's conversation that what happens to some people is a sense of helplessness and despair. You feel like it's always going to be that way. You may be frustrated with one party, vote them out, and it continues in a never-ending cycle. How do you help people understand that if we do not make the connections between the corruption that we see in our country and how it implicates your individual life? No matter what people say, we're all innately selfish.
Yeah.
And when I go to the grocery store, I am upset of how much I have to pay for my groceries as much as any other person. Or if I have to put gas in my car or pay a bus fare to go somewhere. And all of these things are connected to the inefficiencies that have been fueled by corruption in the country.
Absolutely.
How do you build that connection for people?
Well, first of all, we by education. One, we're hearing more and more people talk about it now. We know that there's a direct link between the cost of living in this country and the lack of services. When you see a hospital that's broken down and not working, it's because the monies are not properly applied for the things that they should be applied to. When you see bloated contracts all over the place and roads being built for no immediate and urgent need, right? When you see the courts make declarations that spending has been taking place over and over without proper allocations, without proper accounting, people have to wake up now. And I'm hoping that people will begin to make the connect between all of these actions that we've seen over the last 10 years and corruption and the cost of living and the lack of proper services. If we have a minister of police whose full-time job is seeking donations and contributions and looking for money all over the place, how can he be focused on running his ministry properly? And that goes for all the other ministries. We've seen the corruption in the Ministry of Education. We've seen corruption in the Ministry of Health. We've seen corruption in almost every ministry.
Now, people will feel like you are just saying that now, but I want to highlight.
I've been saying it for the last 10 years.
And I want to say that because as we prepare, budgetary preparations are taking place. People are writing up their budgets. And one of the things that you have consistently brought to the media, to the Senate, and right here on the show is the lack of information that is available for contracts. I bring this up because you are, you know, blatantly saying this ministry, that ministry, this ministry. But this is based on what you have seen in all budgets that have been presented, where you cannot see where the contracts are going, where the money is being spent, and all the necessary information isn't available. Is that the basis that you use for such an allegation? You
hit it on the head. There's such a total lack of transparency in the way we handle people's money. It's people's money. Remember that we pay taxes. I constantly say how much we pay. It affects the cost of living. The taxes affect us in every way. We pay for it, and the least we should expect is some accounting of it. Tell we, you know, why it's important for you to spend it here, and what are we getting for it? Like I tell you many times.
And why this contractor?
Right. The process, because we want to encourage competitiveness. You want to encourage why we get the best deal. We're going to contractor A because he's promised us this, this one, and he give away a better price. Value for money. Value for money, and we have not seen that. If you're going to be disposing of large tracts of land, and then the next thing you know, ministers they sell land in the Pine Ridge, after you kick him out of office for selling passports to somebody in jail in Taiwan, something wrong, man. Something wrong. What entitled him to that piece of land and not you? Right? And we've seen this over and over and over. And this Prevention of Corruption Act, which the Integrity Commission should be, you know, monitoring or reporting should be done to them, speaks to all of this. It speaks to bribing. It speaks to bribing. It says any advantage. Remember what's an advantage? A loan, a gift, right? Property, all of that. He say, to induce that person to do something for you, acting in his capacity as minister, is against the law. So if you give somebody a gift because he's getting a passport for you, or if you give somebody a contribution, big contribution because you want to give him and all the family visas, that should be reported. And it's against the law if there is a quid pro quo. So we have the laws. We don't need UNCAC, you know. We don't need no UNCAC. What we need that just for make the people in charge of implementing laws in our country implement the laws that we, I would say we have too many laws. Too many clouds. We need to start total legal reform, simplify the laws, and simplify who responsible. In fact, we know who responsible, and maybe shield those institutions that should uphold the law, because this thing, our system of government, is not working. We have too much power at the top, and when that power is corrupt, it protects everybody underneath it, and nobody gets convicted. I was reading a release the other day where they talk about people where they go to jail for thief little things, $5, $10, $15. Those are the people that where our system is prosecuting, right? The people that commit small offenses, and the people that commit major offenses under our law, what happened to them? Because they're properly affiliated with the right party in power, nothing happens to them. And this is not today. So we need to wake up. Thank you, BNTU, for waking up. Thank you, PSU, for waking up. Thank you, NTUCB, for waking up. And people at Belize, you need to wake up.
Well, okay, so you seem, and you've started with this point, and at least in this portion of the conversation, you seem to be hammering down on it, that the fact that the unions are now speaking out as well is a good indicator to you. But you also said it to yourself. This is a bit of the feeling that we saw mid-2000s when there were allegations of corruptions being made then. There were students that were most active, that barged into schools and took children out of school, and I would definitely say crossed the line when we went into the phase of the riot. But we have seen this type of agitation. There were no subsequent changes that came along with it. There were lip service. There were reforms made within the legislation. In fact, the latest reform has just been solidified in the court with the spending that government did, with actually the ruling saying, well, go back and fix it and make it retroactive.
Look, I don't have all the answers, and there's no single magic bullet.
Yes.
If we want to live in a democracy, democracy entails, and we've said this, people participation. We will get from our democracy what we put into it. We can't expect for sit back, sit down, and expect things to get better unless we get involved. And by being involved, I mean we have to agitate for change, we have to pressure for change, we have to use our vote wisely and not corrupt it, right? Because we have enough corruption in that already. We've seen how many people we've brought in and given them citizenship and passports, etc., right? To use them to remain in power. We've seen that on the testimony. So we have to wake up. We are a young democracy, right? A lot of countries have gone through this, baby steps. We wake up today. We've been talking about it in the past. We're waking up today again. We've woken up in the past and we've had changes. Granted, the people that promised change did not. We have to become more educated. The press has become a lot more vigilant. I must say that you're one of the strong legs of a good democracy, if we want to live in a democracy. And people participation is key in any democracy. I want to see the young people of this country get involved. I want to see the young people of this country begin to realize that what we do today affects them tomorrow. It affects their opportunities not only for jobs, but it affects their opportunities for housing, for better health care, right? For a safer environment.
But also the cost of living that they will face in the future. We haven't talked recently of where we are in terms of debt.
We'll talk about that soon when budget they come up. Budget they come up soon.
And how that has an implication. I mean, there's a debt that individually each one of us carry already.
Over $10,000 per person,
I was going to say, at the last count, we were looking at each individual citizen owing to the external community $10,000. Right. This isn't about your bank loan. This is what we eat individually.
Man, woman, and child, old man, old lady, when they work. So when you bring that down now to only the productive people in our society, the people that work, the people that earn, right? It multiplies, because if you have a family of 5 or 6, mother, father, maybe 3 or 4 children, and only the father they work, he owes $60,000 for the 6 of them. You see how it magnifies, and you see why we should be interested. No, a lot of people in our society are so taken up with just living day to day that they can't involve. And we see the ministers day to day, they are involved in only trying to get money. So the reason we're here, quite frankly, make a wrap up this segment if you want, is that those people that we sent to Balmapan, it appears, full time, are dedicated to fundraising and not ministry managing. Yes.
We're going to come back and continue this conversation. It's not over yet.
No,
you said very clearly, and I think this is a critical point. You said we don't need the UNCAC. That's a very interesting statement to make. But your point is that we do have regulations, we do have laws that can help us to get out and move our way out of the systems that we see. We'll be discussing some of those after the break. So please stay tuned.
When someone you love becomes a memory, the memory becomes a treasure. Channel 5 introduces the Daily Obituaries. The Daily Obituaries will broadcast all death and funeral announcements and memorials to honor your loved one's life and memories. The Daily Obituaries airs on Channel 5 prior to the evening newscast, with subsequent repeats at 10 p.m. and 12 noon the following day. It will also be placed online on our social media platforms, all for a standard package fee. Celebrate their lives and memories with Channel 5's Daily Obituaries. Honor in life and reverence in death.
We're back and we're moving into the second part of our conversation for this morning. Today we're taking the time to kind of dissect and be able to put into perspective of the frustration that people have been feeling, the issue of corruption that has been a part of the larger conversation, and looking at the implications on everyday citizens and also on the business community or the economy at play. I'm joined, of course, by Business Senator Mark Lizarraga, and the first part of the conversation, we spoke about a lot of different things. We spoke of what the Chamber has been asking for. We spoke of how the unions have kind of chimed into the wider conversation and the need for the wider public to be able to demand better. But you also said something I think that people are probably scratching their head about, which is we don't need the UNCAC. And I want to give you the opportunity to qualify that.
Thank you. What I was saying is, if we implemented the laws that we have on our books today, it was in that context that I said it, that we wouldn't be in need of an UNCAC. Because we have enough laws that regulate how we spend the people's money, how we collect the people's money, how we should decide how to spend the people's money, when to spend the people's money, and the format, the whole budgeting process, etc. We have something called program budgeting that is outlined clearly in the books now, and it tells you what our targets should be. It identifies priorities, right? And we shouldn't be seeing this emergency spending, right? Undeclared for the most part. So we have laws. We have laws on the books. And when I said that in passing, I'm saying if we had the implementation of the laws we had in the book, there'd be no need for an UNCAC. That's what I was saying. I'm not.
Yeah.
No, obviously today.
No, we do need.
We need external forces to help us. Let's be very clear. All of this that's happening right now in the last week or two, where did this information and the evidence come from? From abroad, through the press, not local. So those that are responsible for identifying breaches in our laws and identifying breaches to the Constitution, and those that are with the responsibility
Yeah.
And those institutions that are with the responsibility to highlight these things have not been doing so. And the question is, why?
So let's start with that. I think that that's part of what I hear you saying, that, and we've heard it many times before, that on paper, Belize has some really great oversight bodies that if they're functioning properly, we wouldn't be talking about corruption with the level of frustration that we speak of today. There's the Integrity Commission, there is the Public Accounts Committee, there is the Auditor General's Office, there's the Contractor General's Office. What else am I missing here?
The police, the office of the DPP, all of these institutions.
So
but let's, can we deal with, let's start with the Contractor General, for example. One, we never have one for 2 years.
Okay, so what would the Contractor General do, and how would that role, if properly executed, help to prevent corrupt practices?
The Contractor General's office, first of all, is about 3 people, I believe. Okay, and we never have one. Now, what should he do with those 3 people? He needs to take a look at all the contracts that the government enters into. He needs to oversee the commitments that government make and for what works. Government issues, I believe, when I last checked, over 1,000 contracts per year. That's over 3 for every day.
And these are contracts for building roads, for building buildings, for legal services, for
anything that the government,
catering.
Right, any contract that the government extends to somebody over a certain value.
Yes.
There are procedures that tell you when you spend so much, you could do it this way. When you spend so much, you do it this way, etc. But he's supposed to review these contracts.
The big ones.
To make sure that there was a proper process that was entered into for the agreement and that it is valid. Contracts over a certain amount of money should go to the Parliament so that Parliament can scrutinize it. That has not been happening. But back to the Contractor.
Legally, that's what's supposed to be done.
Right. But the Contractor General has been identifying a lot of weaknesses, including staffing, resources, etc. So we have that office that on paper looks good, that has not been able to perform its duties because it is under-resourced.
And this has been your issue. Your point, and I remember it very clearly from the Senate, it's not about which person is put into office. It's about not doing it effectively. If I personally cannot scrutinize 1,000 contracts, because it's not humanly possible with the staff of 2, because I'll have to scrutinize it, but also follow through with implementation and timelines and quality of work. So your issue with the last naming of the Contractor General was not so much about who it was, but the fact that it's
setting him up to fail.
Value.
That office needs an attorney for help him. That office needs engineers to help supervise the works to make sure that, look, you said in your contract that this blah, right? And so that office is there only in name. The office of the Ombudsman is a very powerful and important office in our democracy. Again, understaffed, under-resourced. The office of the Auditor General, very important. Look how much fine work has come out from that office. But they visit these offices every how often? Yet every time they visit them, we have issues. You see in the reports.
And it's also the amount of time it takes to do a proper audit.
Yes, we should have internal auditors in every ministry. That's something we've been calling for years, right? And I believe personally that they should be under the supervision of not the ministries, but on an external.
It should be autonomous.
Yes, exactly.
Because very often in the Auditor General's report, we hear of them going in and told that the information isn't available or never receiving it.
Right. So, you know, look. Let's
go back though. I want to get through all these different institutions. Let's talk about the Public Accounts Committee. That's there. It's functioning.
The Public Accounts Committee. We have had issues with that committee because of its composition. It's in paralysis because of the way it's constituted. Yes, the opposition has the chair, but the majority of people sitting on that committee are ministers themselves. Now, what is the Public Accounts Committee? The Public Accounts Committee is that committee set up under Parliament. It's the only one set up that is chaired by a member from the opposition, that the Auditor General reports to. because Parliament is the group that authorizes the spending of money. So the Auditor General goes now and she looks at the ministries and says, well, you know, I found this and this and this. We're not following these procedures. These monies may have been misallocated or misappropriated. And it gives it to the Public Accounts Committee, who should then scrutinize it and report back to Parliament. Open, right? The system should be open. Everybody are here when you go to the House debate. But first of all, the reports are delayed in many instances for years because you don't get all the information from the Accountant General. Because they don't have enough resources. So much so that they haven't been able to balance the checkbooks in years. We can't balance with checkbooks, none at all apparently.
So the reports
no reconciliations are done in many instances, so a lot of, so we see a lot of monies unaccounted for. Let me continue.
Yeah.
So back to the Public Accounts Committee. So when you get these reports that are damning against ministries now, you talk about the actual affairs or how you run your ministry and how monies were allocated and spent. Who sits on the committee? The very ministers. And they are there, and they are the majority,
yeah,
right? And they're going to be there to protect their ministries and their colleagues' ministries.
And they also have to collectively approve what they're going to investigate at any given time. I use this example with you, and I think that that's part of what we don't. I mean, the Public Accounts Committee can do great work.
Excellent.
If it functions properly. But what we see is that you're in a relationship now, and your last one was terrible. And all you keep on doing is going back and trying to figure out what went wrong with the last one while you have problems with this one. You never fix the relationship you're in because you're constantly looking at the ex-boyfriend or the ex before the ex to find out what went wrong there when you don't move on.
Somebody once told me, you can't drive one car, steer one ship, or drive one plane and look back way. That's why you crash. So you have to be looking forward. Yes, you could look in your rearview mirror and look to the side and look back, but your main attention has to be where you are now and where you're going. Now,
so there's a Public Accounts Committee.
Let me go back to the Public Accounts Committee though, because this government of reform that promised reform, accountability and transparency had agreed, made commitments to the chamber. The last time we were up in arms about reform, made commitments to the chamber that we were going to change the composition of the Public Accounts Committee so that the government lost its majority, so that we could come out with reports on a more timely basis. And that has not been put into place. It was one of the demands, by the way, from the teachers when they last went on strike. And it's going to be interesting to see if that surfaces again. They'll be meeting this weekend at Santa decide. But my point is this: we have beautiful laws. What we have is a deliberate lack of determination and will to implement the laws that we have. That was my point. Now the point, underlying point: how do we do that as citizens?
So let me come back to it though, because this is it is easy for the ruling party to go into the next election and kind of look at what they have accomplished. And they can say that the Public Accounts Committee is working. It is there. They physically get together. They're looking at reports. It doesn't matter what era, but they're looking at reports. It doesn't matter how fast they move or what information they get. So there is some truth, but not necessarily the whole truth. Similarly, the Integrity Commission, I really found it interesting when the Prime Minister spoke of the declaration of assets. But
before we go to Integrity Commission, I'm going to go back to the PSC. You agree that the Auditor General in all her reports has unveiled many irregularities, illegalities, misappropriations, etc. in her reports. What has the PSC said or done at Parliament to correct them or recommended to Parliament? Have they? We've seen the reports on immigration, from the Auditor General. What has been done about those? Well, why are we waiting for the Senate Special Committee to make a report on a report when the police has those documents already, the DPP has those documents, and they've been given the transcripts according to what we're told? Right? That's public knowledge. So why are we waiting on a
also
report and a report when we already have a report? There's no need for that.
And all the information took place in the public. The
Thank you very
video
much.
testimonies that
Thank you
people
very
can
much.
go back
So there's
to
a
as well.
lack of a will to act. That is clear. That is evident, Marlene. Anybody, blind-eyed Jamesy could tell you that.
Yes, I understand that. But I think that sometimes the lip service that is offered, saying, oh, well, we're waiting on the Auditor General report, or the file has been passed on to the DPP for Holy and Shaw. Let's use that example. I think that's such a classic example. Anyone who spent time in the South would know, or should know if you haven't, that these students that go to this school wake up at 3, 4 a.m. before I even wake up for this show, to travel to school at high school level every single day. This is a part of the sacrifice that these children are making to get their education. With $2 million just being wasted,
that is
right there in a school. And this is one school in one area. The next one, as far as I know, and I may be corrected, is TCC, which is in PG Town, another 20-30 minutes away. This is the type of ways that we see monies that could be used maybe for more buses, for, I can't tell you how it can be spent, but it can definitely be better spent than in the pockets of people who are political cronies or politicians.
I can't agree with you more, but we've seen this at the stadium. How long has that stadium been built? And so many things that we've heard about the cost of defense, the cost, contracts being given. I want to know if there's no documentation that the works have been done to the preferred contractors, friends and family, cronies, right? We have a finance officer getting directions directly from the minister and doing whatever you want. I mean, the Auditor General has written volumes and volumes on all the irregularities, but we come back to the same point. Where is the will? Where are the people being prosecuted for these wrongdoings? Or you know what?
But
we found out that there was a weakness in this system, and we're coming to the National Assembly now to pass a law to correct it, or we're setting up a new office to correct it.
But then we pass the laws and
yes,
then we
yeah, I agree with you.
implement it.
I agree with you. I agree with you. But what I'm saying is, at least you see some effort to reform.
So
right?
This is why I keep on coming back to what I was getting to before, which is the declaration of the assets. Because the political will come from the politicians themselves. And depending on their level of involvement or their level of gain from the system that does exist, one would assume, quite naturally, if my hand's clean, I'll say clearly, let's investigate, let's do something now. If I have a few extra dollars, a few extra houses, a few extra properties, a few extra accounts that I don't want to be disclosed, then I won't necessarily be first in line to say, let's start the investigation. Which is why the declaration of assets is critical. You declare your assets as a senator. You're supposed to enter in.
And I don't collect no money, nor spend no money on behalf of government.
You are supposed to say, here is what I have in my account before I entered into office. $400,000 in total assets. Let's say, if you're a very good businessman or woman, when I leave office, what I should have amassed during that time should be on a practical level, because my only job then is to be an elected official based on the salary that they receive, which is, they have salary and allowances. The salary and allowances that they receive. So when I look at what I have gained over that time, even if I am the best saver and I live like a miser, it should make sense.
Or they could have investments
need the
too,
declaration. Okay,
but
so you're growing wealth,
right.
all right? But it must be reasonable. That's why you have the declaration on a yearly basis.
It's again.
But what we haven't said is that the declaration of assets did not take place from 2000. I can't even remember when was the last one that took place. When did it start?
I think the law was somewhere around 2008, 2009, right? The Integrity Commission, that law was passed. But your point is right. Your point is right that the law is very clear. You're supposed to declare your assets for the year before you get into politics. Right through all those years that you're in politics until the year that you leave politics, all right? So that people can see, and it's published. It's published in the Gazette. But for many years, we couldn't form, supposedly, this Integrity Commission because nobody wanted to be a politically exposed person because they themselves had to file, to declare. Yeah. Which is a travesty in and of itself. Anyhow, now I understand that the Prime Minister said, well, we can't go back and look for all of the early years because we never have a commission. But the law doesn't say that you should only file when you have a commission, or you should only file when you have a board. The law is very clear. You should file from the year before you get into politics till the year after. How many, let's be real, man. We live in Belize, we know everybody, we know one another. How many ministers we've seen gone from rags to riches? How many ministers have we seen that?
Well, they could use the same excuse the same reasoning you just said. They have assets.
Well, fine. Then you declare them so people could see it. You know, I have a store. I have a whatever. You know, but the laws are there, and even so, if let's say they have one business, they have to declare if they're getting contracts from government. You know, the laws are very clear. You have to report to the Governor General. You know, you shouldn't do so and so and so and so. We have the laws. But your point is this, that it hasn't been done. And we need to ask ourselves, why do we allow that? Because this was a fantastic piece of legislation.
Yes.
That was put in place as one of the many checks and balances.
Well,
but how many laws we've seen that the very government has put into place that they ignore, they break it, or when they break it and they get catch, you have to carry it in a court, or they pass a law to change it.
Well, and I think my point goes beyond the fact that this system has failed. The Integrity Commission has not been able to do exactly what it's supposed to do, which is ensure that we have people of integrity in office who will see the level of corruption and say, well, let's get the public accounts working. Let's make sure the Contractor General's office is fully functioning so we can be able to stop or reduce the level of wastage that we're seeing. But if you don't know, if we don't publicly declare that my hands are clean, and the only assumption is that if you are not jumping up for this cause, then maybe your hands aren't. Yeah. It's a part of what can be the impetus to keep everybody else accountable, if I have to be accountable. Yeah. Would you agree?
Yes, no, I agree with you totally.
Maybe that's why you feel more comfortable keeping people accountable, because you declare, right?
Exactly. I have to declare here. What? Then I'll come out at me right away if I don't declare. But you know, the Office of the Integrity Commission as well, they're understaffed.
Yes.
You know, and that's not an excuse, it's a reality. So all the institutions of oversight that should be doing these things have been deliberately controlled, under-resourced, understaffed. So it goes back to our will. The people were outraged. They put you into power to fix things, right?
Yeah.
You keep complaining about the past, but I'm not saying nobody from the past get penalized, frankly. So where was that will to change, to improve, to implement, to reform? None of that. None of that. That will only come from a people that demand it. That's why this week is important, Merlene.
And the first demand is to make the functioning system, the existing systems, function properly. I don't want to lose the opportunity because we're quickly running out of time. What we don't have on our laws, which is part of the call that we're hearing now, is campaign financing regulations. Right. And I want to take the time to break that down. We've never had it.
Right.
And I think sometimes we're a bit unaware of how the ties made during election season, pre-election season, come to fruition after someone has been elected or a party has been elected.
Well, everybody else in our society has to declare income. Everybody else, business people and people that are employed, you have to declare your income, you have to show, you have to pay taxes on it, etc., right? And it's a travesty that the people that control the biggest budget in the country, the politicians, are not being asked to declare their financial contributions. this is disposable income, really, because so far it's been unaccounted. You know, there's no accountability. You could receive money from anybody, literally, and give it away supposedly to anybody. I assume it's mostly cash. I don't know. So there's no declarations going on, and the time has come now, I believe, and as does the chamber, as the unions, the NGO community, we're saying, look, they need to start declaring too. We need to be able, and it can't be only lip service. We have to look at the laws very carefully, and trust me, if and when those laws come, I'm sure they'll receive a lot of scrutiny, not only from the media, but from all the NGO community as well, and the business community. But we need to be regulating this area. There's no magic bullet.
But let me just continue.
But it's an important key, I believe, to moving forward.
Allow me to push a bit further with the campaign finance legislation. Senator, understanding what you know about how politics works in this country, is it perhaps a bit far-fetched to believe that any political party will venture into disclosing who is giving them money and how much they're giving them money and in what form they're giving them money? Because some of these election campaign financing, you're not talking about $10,000 as a total sum. It's big money.
Big money.
And with what purpose?
Well, we know what the purpose was in this last case. At least one of the purposes. And we've seen other cases. But can we expect it? Again, if we live in a democracy, and if we want to live in a democracy, we have to demand it. And we have to be willing to do whatever it is to ensure that we get what we want from our democracy. And I hope that when the heads of these organizations and the unions and the business community and everybody gets together, they're calling for campaign financing reform, maybe they should start drafting the legislation to ensure that they have in those laws, or they negotiate with the government or the leader of the opposition or whosoever is coming to power, that they have in those laws what it is that we want. Not what it is some politician thinks he's going to pass just to band-aid something to appease us, and then that body or that institute responsible for overseeing this is weakened as well and not functional. We have to demand. You know, I'm wondering where the FIU is in all of this. All of these things that we keep hearing right now. We set up a financial intelligence unit that was supposed to be independent and blah, 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 blah. Again, to look into these things. You know, you're nothing from them. Why? That's a reasonable. We have foreign exchange regulations. We have movement of money across, you know, exiting and entering our country. Yeah. And yet you hear about all these monies that were moved. Where
we're presuming is moved. We don't.
Well, it can't come by itself.
Because in a declaration of assets, you'd also have to say if you have funds stored somewhere else as well.
That's right. So my point is this. This week is important. This week is very important because the people will have a chance to organize. First of all, visually, to send a message. But second of all, I hope that the message is very precise. And I hope that the people that are calling for these actions will carry through, and not just a one-time event, or that the burden of this quest is not left on one group. That's why I'm happy to see that the teachers have support now from the NTUCB and the PSU and the business community. I hope would get involved as well. So it's a part of growing your democracy. It's a struggle that many countries go through, Marlene.
Yes.
We're not see it change overnight, but we'll see it change to the extent that we're willing to go out there and demand change.
Now, I have one more question, and I think that is a part of what we hear from people. The current call for protest comes from the opposition, and people are very wary.
Well, no, not only the opposition.
Well, I mean, they were the first. They were the first.
Well, yes.
And people are very wary of the partisan politics and the deep divide that takes place in this country. you know, when you look at this issue, there is a need to separate the politics from it and just see it as something that is important to the development of the country. But do you think we're there? That people are comfortable standing up, knowing that anytime you oppose to something that a government does, people automatically assign you to the opposition? And you've been victim to this.
Oh yeah. That is unfortunate that we brand and label people not on the message, but because it's they're critical of you, or they're suggesting that there are better ways to do things. Back to this thing about the opposition, I hope they have learned. I hope they've learned their lesson. They've been out of power for so long, and they're making promises now. We'll see. But certainly I know that right now, today, people are not very happy with the government that's in power, because they've turned out to be everything except that which they promised they would be. And that's very disappointing. Again, Marlene, some people have to get out there, and today is a time for leadership in our country. This week is a time for leadership, and we'll see many people emerge, and we'll see who are the true leaders this week. The shakers and movers, and we'll see who really are serious about reform and improving this country. Marlene, I was reading a book from Lee Kuan Yew, the father of the Singapore Revolution, and when you think about it, Singapore, a sandbar, just only island like San Pedro or something was sandbar, and look how they have come from third to first world. Their GDP is among the highest in the world.
But it took radical changes.
It took vision.
Yeah.
Right? It took discipline.
Yeah.
The rule of law.
Yeah.
A strong rule of law. And in our lifetime, in the same period
of
our independence.
Yes.
The same time.
You're right.
And look at the big contrast. And we have so many resources, so much wealth in this country, and yet so much poverty. Almost half our people.
Well, we're a middle-income country, right? That's our designation.
We are. When half of your people live right around the poverty line, I mean, come on. And it's not because we don't have the resources. It's because the people who we have put in there to manage our resources have looked after their self-interest first. They've looked after the political party first. They look after their constituents first. When it's so short-sighted, because if you look after the country, these people will benefit.
Well,
if you look at the well-being and the education of our people, our country will progress. We should be a first world country, not a third world country.
All right. Well, we thank you for coming in and sharing your thoughts with us as to everything that has been happening. But more importantly, you seem, as you said quite a few times, you are looking forward in looking at what actions will be spurred from last week's event. Thank you.
From this week's event.
And this week's event, yes. We're going to go ahead and take a break, and we'll be back in a few. Stay tuned.